Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of TheGrill. I'm Sharon Waxman, the founder and editor-in-chief of TheWrap. You know me by now. Before we get to day 2, I want to bring you a very special announcement. I'm here with Claire Burgess, the Director of Relations at the Breakthrough Prize. Now, this past January, Claire and I stood together at TheWrap's Sundance dinner and announced the launch of a new competition for innovative science filmmaking created to promote and support the development of films dedicated exclusively to science and scientists. That was in January. Little did we know how important the subject of science would become in the subsequent months. Through this competition, Breakthrough Prize and TheWrap have identified talented filmmakers who are passionate about bringing scientific ideas to life and who have the visual storytelling skills to create short films that express the beauty and significance of these ideas, as well as the characters of the scientists who do the research. So we come together today to announce the winning finalists. Before we do that, let me tell you a little bit, or show you a little bit about the Breakthrough Prize.
Live from Hangar 1 in NASA's Ames Research Center in Silicon Valley.
I'm your host, James Corden, otherwise known as the third Winklevoss twin.
Tonight's show is about honoring great scientists and the power that science has to reveal hidden worlds.
So tonight, we shine a light on men and women who are truly role models.
The brightest stars from the worlds of science.
We'd seen the unseeable. We'd open a new window on the universe.
Technology.
The more we learn about DNA, the clearer it becomes just how much our DNA influences who we are.
And Hollywood.
It's a thrill to stand here celebrating other hidden figures.
The Breakthrough honors not only the great scientists of today, but also the great scientists of the future.
Gathered to award over $20 million for excellence in physics.
Science is a rock of truth in a sea of fake news.
Mathematics.
Good ideas, I think, survive, and then those ideas could be used later for complicated problems.
And the life sciences.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman, for your discovery that literally saved my life and the lives of many across the globe.
I believe that science and technology can help us to cure, prevent, and manage all human diseases within our children's lifetimes.
Your Breakthrough Prize recipients, ladies and gentlemen.
This is the Breakthrough Prize. Scientists changing the world.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sharon, for the kind introduction. And of course, the Breakthrough Prize would like to thank TheWrap, Sharon, Drea Clark, our judges, and everyone who submitted their beautiful film proposals. In the clip, you just saw the highlights of our annual Breakthrough Prize ceremony, which has been referred to as Oscar of Science, where stars of film, music, sports, and technology present the largest scientific award to fundamental scientists in the field of life science, mathematics, and physics. Really, the whole mission of the Breakthrough Prize is to raise the profile and prestige of scientists so that society values them in the same way they do entertainers and entrepreneurs. It's also intended to inspire the next generation to pursue scientific careers. And within the ceremony, we showed laureate short films. And these films play a critical role in raising scientific profiles and highlighting the importance of their work. So in an effort to get a new, fresh perspective and hopefully inspire more storytellers, this is why we decided to partner with TheWrap for the Breakthrough Prize Filmmakers Challenge. And really, these films help explain what the laureates did and why it matters. So for a younger generation, filmmaking is particularly important storytelling medium. The winning filmmakers will all receive a $5,000 cash prize for the winning proposal and a contract to work on a short film for this year's laureate. The film will air live during the ceremony in March and be available to view on TheWrap in March. These winning proposals showed three major things. They showed a deep engagement with scientists and their ideas, creative ways to bring those ideas to life, and a strong sense of characters and stories involved. So without further ado, here are this year's winners.
Okay, here we go.
First, we have Dana Turkin for her creative proposal on Life Science Laureate winner Joanne Corey. Next, we have Cutter Hodiern and John Hibby for their creative proposal on Physics Laureate Svante Pavo. Now we have Grace McNally for her creative proposal on Fundamental Physics Laureate Shep Doleman and the Event Horizons Telescope team. Hussein Kurumboy and Carrie McCarthy for their proposal on the Life Science Laureate Joanne Corey. Thor Klein for his creative proposal on Physics Laureate Svante Pavo. And finally, we have Molly Murphy for her creative proposal on Physics Laureate Kip Thorne.
So let me just explain one more time. So these 6 finalists have been paired anew with a breakthrough prize winner, and they will make a short film between now and the ceremony in March, new film about each of these winners. So we all look forward to seeing that. If we don't get to see the breakthrough prize itself, which I think airs on YouTube, right, Claire?
It'll be on YouTube, right? And Nat Geo as well.
And on National Geographic television, which is fantastic. And of course, you all will want to watch it stream on, you want to watch the films on TheWrap. Thank you so much, Claire, and congratulations to all our winning finalists.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, everyone who participated.
Welcome to the Spotlight conversation at TheGrill. I'm excited to talk to Miranda July. She's someone I've wanted to interview for a long time. She's a writer-director, and she's an artist who works across many other disciplines, including but not limited to FaceTime. Her daring voice speaks to the poignancy of the human plight, something that feels more urgent than ever at this time. Her latest film is Kajillionaire, starring Evan Rachel Wood, Richard Jenkins, Deborah Winger, and Gina Rodriguez, and it will be released this week on Focus Features, September 25th. The film is about 2 con artists, Jenkins and Winger, who have spent 26 years training their only daughter to swindle, scam, and steal. Miranda also wrote, directed, and starred in The Future and Me and You and Everyone We Know, winning the Camera d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and a special jury prize at the Sundance Film Festival in 2005. That work is now available on the Criterion Collection. She's also an award-winning author whose most recent book, titled Miranda July, is an art monograph on her career to date. That was published this year. Her collection of short stories, No One Here More Than You, won the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award and has been published in 23 countries. It Chooses You was her first book of nonfiction, which was followed by her debut novel, The First Bad Man. Her participatory artworks include 11 Heavy Things, a sculpture garden created for the 2009 Venice Biennale, New Society, Somebody, and an interfaith charity shop in Selfridge's department store in London. She was raised in Berkeley, California. She lives in Los Angeles. Miranda July, welcome to TheGrill.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. I bet you never thought you'd be at a business conference. Something tells me.
I'm excited. I'm looking at like the shrubbery behind you, and
it's very serious. It's very business-like shrubbery, for sure.
I like it.
Well, as I said, I really have been wanting to interview you for a long time because I've known about your work, but I've strangely never encountered you at any of the independent film festivals that I've gone to. And so I'm really excited to get to talk to you, first and foremost, about your new film, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January, before the entire world fell apart. Before we talk about it, why don't we take a look at a clip?
Is this the normal amount of turbulence for this route?
Yes.
Really?
Totally. Oh, no. What? Oh.
I thought that I forgot my headphones.
Did they say that there was Wi-Fi in this plane? I don't remember. Oh, there is. Oh, you gotta pay. Why do they do that?
You're better off.
Oh, this? Oh, I know. Trust me, I'm the worst. I like sleep with it. It's like my third arm.
It's a tool.
was originally designed by and for the military and the intelligence community. The CIA and Army ground ops specifically is a powerful and dangerous tool.
You don't have a cell phone?
I use it as it was intended, and I don't dress it up and play dolly with it.
Oh, well then don't be my mom.
So Miranda, how has it been releasing a film, making a film in the middle of COVID? And then we should sort of back up a little bit because the film has another history as well, because it was going to be released by Annapurna, and then that turned out to have a hiccup, and now it's a focus. Talk a little bit about just the challenges you faced in just making and getting the film out.
Well, I mean, despite all that, this movie for me has been kind of dreamy, at least initially. I finished the script. I gave it to Dee Dee Gardner, who I knew was a fan. She said, yes, let's absolutely make this. She was already partnered, had this relationship with Annapurna, and I was friendly with them. And so they jumped on board and, you know, fully financed it at that highest level. You know, we got exactly what we wanted. And those two partners continue to be lovely. I mean, I really couldn't ask for more. But yeah, as that was happening, Annapurna was exploring distribution, and I think we were, you know, it's fair to say we're always kind of trying to sense, like, where is that company going to be, you know, when we're done and ready for it to come out. And they had always said, we want it to have the best home, and it was agreed once it was done, this isn't the most perfect fit, especially for where we are right now. And so so we had to sell it, which for me, of course, is nothing new. I've sold my last 2 movies at Sundance, and so that's what we did with this one. And we were lucky to have, you know, our pick of my favorite companies, you know, all friends and people that I've been in conversation with, and Focus just was so passionate that was, you know, very clear that and they're a good partner for this particular movie, I think. And then, yes, we thought we were going to release it in June, and
in theaters.
In theaters, yeah, we were going to go to Cannes. Yeah, we're going to Cannes, and then right after that, we're going to release it. So it was a nice path that we had in mind, as we all had so many nice paths laid out for ourselves. And so there was that initial disappointment, but I have to say, Focus never changed as far as their complete dedication to doing right by this. But what that meant was they had to be incredibly agile, and we would have lots of conversations where they kept saying, look, we're gathering data. We don't want to just call it a loss and release it to streaming, you know, right now, you know, in June. We think there's a way, we think there's a path. And meanwhile, I was having the weird experience as I began to do press for the movie of talking to people who had only ever seen it from within quarantine. And while it had, you know, did really well, obviously, at Sundance, it was almost like a different movie to these viewers who were so alone, who were so sensitive to touch. I mean, you know, a big theme in the movie is this fear of the big one, and surviving and being transformed by it, and this sensitivity to touch, and all those things that I had worried might be a little too subtle or personal, were suddenly not abstract at all. And I think most recently I've decided to just own it, that in the end, I made this movie for us now, like us in this pandemic, because that is the reality of what's happening. And I don't think on the most, like, the level that us filmmakers work, which is really wanting to have it creatively connect more than anything, I don't think that has been harmed. I think there is a stillness and a receptivity and a kind of like attentiveness to all the issues that are, you know, that are at the heart of this story. That, you know, I wish it, you know, I wouldn't wish a global pandemic on any time, but I feel grateful to have something to give right now.
Wow, what a great way of looking at it. So for our viewers and our listeners who mostly haven't seen the film, even if you've seen a clip, and we'll show a little bit more in a little while, what you're referring to in the film is this very singular, quirky family, Richard Jenkins and Deborah Winger. Deborah Winger like you've never seen her, and Evan Rachel Wood like you've never seen her. This almost like she really sort of flattens her affect in a way of that is, I could see how you would be concerned that people could appreciate the subtlety of what you're doing. First of all, one of the things I love and why I wanted to get to interview you is there aren't so many writer-directors out there who have such a unique vision and a unique voice. And you took 10 years between films. That's quite a long time. You've done a ton of things in between. But I'd love to understand a little more, what is the origin of the story? These two con artist parents living with their grown 20-something-year-old daughter in a hole in LA with in a bubbles factory, where they're kind of camping out because they have no money, and take themselves extremely seriously at the same time, which is a source of both drama and humor and a certain tragedy, right? That's kind of underlying the whole thing. Talk about where the story came from, if you would just give us a little bit of context.
Right. I mean, so this is the first movie I've made as both a daughter of parents and as a mother, as a parent myself. And I think when you're only a child, no matter how old you are, there's a way in which parenting can seem like the sky above you, like kind of seamless, and all you can do is sort of shake your fist at it. And then when you become a parent, you realize, oh, this is just a series of decisions I've made at this particular moment in my life, and it almost, you have many adulthoods, but it ends up being their one childhood, and it's like too big a burden in a way to take responsibility for. And so I think rather than just, I never do well with straight literal autobiographic work, but I wanted to make a family where you got a sense of the parenting as not something that was inherent, but like a series of choices, but that to the daughter seemed seamless. There was no way out of it until she does, in fact, cross paths with someone who begins to ask questions that unravel the whole thing. And
who's Gina Rodriguez, right?
Right, Gina's character. So I think, this isn't what you think of as like a maternal, what movie, right? Like it's a very tricky mom in this movie. But if we expand what, I think that realm of what we think of as maternal is pretty narrow. It only includes a couple things. And really what I'm talking about is like, let's question just the whole thing, the whole structure of what a family is. And let's take this kind of extreme heightened version of that to sort of look at like, just the structure itself. And within that, for me, there's a lot of feelings. I feel like there's a bunch of inherent betrayal, that the parents will describe a world that will never be the world that the child is ultimately going to live in. And so that's a kind of deception. And then the child will leave, and that's the child's job. And that's, kind of a built-in betrayal. So that heartbreak is really pretty central to this movie.
Did the story of con artists or scam artists, did that sort of come from something in particular, or it's an interesting construct. It's right, and it's funny. It's really funny.
I mean, I grew up watching a lot of Mission Impossibles, the TV show, you know, like the old one. My dad and brother, my older brother and dad loved those, and I watched them too. And I still do love that language of sort of high stakes, you know, who's who, the reversals, not quite understanding the con as an audience until the very, very end, you know.
Right.
And that, I love that. It's very innate to me. I could write that all day. Those Mission Impossible didn't have a lot to offer a little girl, you know, or a grown woman, for example. Like there's just not much there for me to relate to. And so it was a fun challenge to see, like, could I make something emotionally resonant to me? You know, I want to be like at the mercy of my scripts. I want them to, you know, be some kind of crucible through which I'm understanding myself, but still a heist film, you know, still ultimately to the very end dedicated to the con.
That's okay. I would never have guessed that. Also, you know, I think a lot of people will understand it as a parenting film, but a very sort of through a cracked mirror kind of parenting film. But one of the things that's just so great is that you achieve this really unique tone that is so much your voice, and you know, it's got to be hard to hit that as a filmmaker because you're putting it on the page, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's all in your head, and since you're the writer director and you have all of that control, you know exactly what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where like my particular path comes into play because, you know, I wanted to be a director from, you know, since I was a teenager, like every other director out there. But, you know, along the way, as I was teaching myself how to do that, I also wrote performances where I played all the parts. I made short movies, you know, that I acted in, and I was very used to having total control over my worlds, down to, you know, I will just do everything. I will play the part of the man or the child. I'll do it all. And of course, in a feature film like this, you give those parts away. But I think I've retained like a really clear, you know, if pressed, if all else failed, I could do the whole thing. Not nearly as well as this cast of characters.
I think that's a good segue. We should take a look at you and me and you and everyone we know, because we have a clip from there, and you're in that film.
All
and
right.
You're an artist in that film, an aspiring artist, and so I think it's a great sort of a glimpse of you on your journey to becoming who you are. You're not done, I'm sure. You're still becoming who you are, but it's an interesting kind of reference point. So let's take a look at that clip.
I love you. I'm not following you. My car is parked over there.
In Smart Park?
No, on Front Street.
Well, I parked in Smart Park.
So at the end of the next block, we'll separate at Tyrone Street.
Yeah, the Iceland sign is halfway. It's the halfway point.
Iceland it's kind of like that point in a relationship, you know, where you suddenly realize it's not going to last forever. You know, you can see the end in sight. Tyrone Street.
Yeah, but we're not even there yet. We're still at the good part. We're not even sick of each other yet.
I'm not sick of you at all. And whoa, it's been a good, like, 6 months, right?
What, 6 months? Then the Iceland sign is like 8 months? You think we'd only last a year and a half?
I don't know. I don't want to be presumptuous. Yeah, I don't know if you're married or what.
Well, I'm separated. We separated last month. I was thinking that Tyrone was like 20 years away at least.
Yeah. Okay, well, actually, I was thinking Tyrone is like when we die of old age. And this is like our whole life together, this walk.
That's perfect. Let's do it that way.
Oh, so it can't be avoided. Everyone dies.
Walk you to your car.
Maybe we should just be glad that we lived this long, good life together. You know, it's so much more than most people ever get to have.
Okay.
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 Okay. Well, don't be afraid. Here we go.
Here we go.
So I'd love to get your perspective on your own work today when you look at that.
Right. Well, I actually I don't look back at my movies after the premiere, and so except when there's cases like this where I have to like approve a clip.
We're forcing you. Yes.
Yeah, you force me. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, right, what was the deal with the sound on this movie? Like I could definitely hear the whole crew, camera person, like, and then I'm like, what's going on with my hair? And yet, there's all these criticisms that I have, right? Because I've learned a few things along the way. But I do see, like, right, it does come down to the performances. Like, that is the essential unit of this medium, is those performances. And there was something really true about that day and that moment. And I can see, like, there's a lot I don't know, but I know this walk and talk. Like this has been in my head for years at that point, at the point when I finally got to shoot it. And isn't that the case for so many first-time directors? Like, this movie has been like their whole life in the making. So in some ways I'm utterly comfortable, and so I do recognize that as well. Like I'm nervous in the scene as that character, but I'm directing it and I'm acting in it, and yeah.
You're happy with it now when you look.
If I overlook a lot of things, I'm like, right, people connected to it because of, not just these two characters, but there's a lot of kids and there's a lot of performances that are very true. And it's a good reminder in a way that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I felt like that introduced us to you. There's a lot of that you can kind of connect with. If folks haven't seen the film, I highly recommend it, and it's now on the Criterion Collection, easy to get. So definitely worth checking out. So then, was there a reason why you took 10 years between that film and Kajillionaire?
Well, first, I did make a movie in between called The Future.
Okay.
And when I came out of Sundance with that movie and was sort of offered the things that a new young voice is offered out of Sundance, I was really clear, like, no, I don't want the first look deal, wherever. I want to get my book of short stories published. Like, if I could parlay this win into that, that to me was like the ultimate, because I knew that I like the slot of indie filmmaker was, I was very honored to receive recognition for it, but it wasn't the whole story of what I was doing and what I had been doing. And so, yes, that that book of short stories opened up a career in writing fiction in the same way that me and you did in film. And so that was really important to me. And to this day, I alternate between fiction and movies. So that explains for a certain amount of time. I mean, I wrote a novel before Kajillionaire, and they worked together. I mean, to be honest, it was my novel that Dee Dee Gardner at Plan B was a fan of. Like that's why she emailed me out of the blue one day. That's how I knew to send her this script. So in a way, while it's not the most common path from filmmaker, it has worked for me because it's drawn the right kind of collaborators to me, who know the kind of freedom that I'll need and the kind of support. They understand that from the beginning.
Okay, well, I say this like totally charitably, in a charitable sense, but I think that most short story writers are writing short stories because they can't do a film, because it's almost like taking a vow of poverty, for God's sake. I mean, you have to have such love of the written word and such commitment, because it's almost impossible to make a living at that.
Right.
Whereas the filmmaker, you've got many more options just because you're going to reach a larger audience.
I mean, yes and no. I think we mostly know in this audience that the director gets their fee, and not a movie has to do really well to the kind of deals that I have to see afterwards. The truth is, I wouldn't be able to make a living if it weren't for my fiction. Like my advances are far exceed. I mean, I would not say this probably to a less insidery crowd, but that is partly how I make it work.
You're safe.
Yeah. So of course that's a lucky position. Yeah. Well, I don't mean that. I'm just trying to say I'm not clueless here about how to function. I'm really they work off each other in a really nice way, and that is a path. And I don't make ads. A lot of directors make ads.
Yeah, right.
I get to always do the thing I love to do and be paid for that.
Have you turned down the opportunity to do advertising?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, of course, you don't this. I mean, to this day, every once in a while, my agents will check in and say, "You're sure you don't need anything?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'll contact you when I'm done with the next thing." But it's I'm self-sustaining just because it's a creative path that I'm on.
Yeah. I'm sure it requires sacrifice to make those choices. That's but it's incredible that you've managed to.
I mean, how do you figure though? It's all in how you think of. I'm not sure what I'm sacrificing. I mean, no, I'm just asking that as a
security. I mean,
what's that?
Financial security. I think there's a lot of money to be made in.
Right. I know, but I'm so happy.
Good.
I guess I'm just partly why I'm throwing that out is I think it's a pretty rough time, and it's going to keep on being hard for people to make money and to have, to only have heroes who are really wealthy is not going to work through the time that we're entering into. So I do sometimes try and take a moment to acknowledge that there might be another path to success that works and that is enough money to live. And that it isn't, it isn't a sacrifice, just because I think it's important now to be questioning just that basic agreement we made, that one thing trumps everything else.
The basic agreement we made as a society, do you mean?
Yeah.
Money's the highest value.
Yeah, with money up there. Yeah. So, I'm just throwing it out. Let's go into breakout groups and discuss.
For sure. Let's go back a little bit and talk about how you grew up and sort of what were the forces that really kind of shaped you. You grew up in Berkeley, California.
Right.
Your parents were writers.
Mm-hmm.
Were they kind of hippies? Berkeley
yeah.
to me for just to begin with, but
I mean, they were business people. Like they ran their own publishing company. They didn't make a living being writers, and so I grew up inside a business. Like for my whole childhood, that business was in the house, North Atlantic Books, and I, filled envelopes and did, like any other business. I had a pretty good understanding of like what adult work was, and that it wasn't enough to just like be magical and interesting and people would come to you. Like, no, actually there's a whole process. We, in order to sell these books, you have to invite people in and you have to reach people. And I think that served me. Like it wasn't, certainly they valued ideas and what was in my head and other people's heads, but it wasn't it wasn't about being just like terminally unique, that was going to somehow make your life easy. It was really like a substantial work ethic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what were the things that you sort of loved to do as a kid? I mean, were you a dreamer? Were you a writer? Were you a reader? Were you already making movies when you were really young?
Well, I was those things. I didn't, we didn't have a video camera. I probably would have done that. What I did was I started writing plays when I was a teenager, when I was in high school. And my first play was based on a correspondence I had with a man in prison, a murderer. And I put that on at like a local all ages punk club, but I cast like adult actors in it. This work ethic was pretty serious. I didn't want it to be like a student production. I wanted it.
That was it. You were actually in real life corresponding?
Right, yeah.
Yes, and how did that happen?
I don't know if they still do this, like they would list prisoners' addresses in the back of magazines and be like, prison pen pal, I think it was like really more geared to middle-aged lonely women and, or something. I don't know who the target audience is. Probably not like 16-year-old girls, but
probably not.
Yeah. But I think I've always.
What did you find appealing about that idea?
I think I was aware that like my world was so small, so insular. Now there would be a million ways to do this through the internet. You wouldn't have to go through such pains. But the idea that I could just like reach outside my world into like a completely, almost like a different planet, and make a connection. And we wrote for years and we eventually started exchanging tape letters. So like recordings, long recordings, talking to each other. And it was intense. I mean, for a teenager also, like to have that much attention from one person, is like.
Was he like a violent criminal or just like a guy who?
Well, he was, I mean, he had killed someone, that's why he was there. I don't think, I think after initially sort of feeling out, like, could this be sexual? And then realizing like that wasn't going to work. Like no one had written him in 12 years, so he didn't want to fuck it up with me. Like, so he sort of took on like a sort of like a philosophical uncle role or something. And yeah, it was such an interesting relationship. Yeah.
And you turned that into a play.
Yeah, that was a play called The Lifers. And then I wrote a bunch of other plays from there, and I started acting in them. And then from there, and then I kept performing, and those got larger and larger. And I started finally making short movies. And those became longer and longer until like a feature film was sort of imaginable.
Was there, there weren't a lot of women writer-directors, maybe a few, who was there any role model out there? We talked about that a lot today, about how it's important to have role models, and you can't be it if you don't see it, and how you imagine yourself into becoming the person you dream of being, you know, your full potential, you know, just.
Right. Yeah.
Were there those people for you? There weren't a ton of women doing.
Right. There weren't. And I mean, so what I had was the whole beginning of indie film. So like, you know, the idea, and this is like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and She's Gotta Have It. Like, I read about all those movies, and that's certainly what put the idea into my head. Like, it seemed accessible. And I also saw the early short films of Jane Campion. Those were important. And then from there, because, you know, what I hadn't seen was like other movies made by anyone like me at the age I was then. And I started this project called Joni for Jackie, where I made a pamphlet, and it basically invited any woman or girl to send me her short movie, and I would put it on a tape, like a VHS tape, with 9 other movies plus hers, and send it back to her. So just so that we could see each other's work and have a context for thinking of ourselves as filmmakers. And it's so laborious, right? I mean, this is pre-YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that today in an afternoon. Basically, that's just so.
Right.
May as well use carrier or something. Yeah. Wow.
I mean, but at the same time, I did that for 10 years. I stopped when I made Me and You and Everyone We Know. And what I did was I surrounded myself with hundreds of women filmmakers. And also the idea that your reasons, I mean, now this is commonplace because of phones that are also cameras, but the idea that you might make a movie for just 1 or 2 other people, or for a smaller audience, or for a more intimate reason, or very casually, like I was trying to sort of demystify it, because, you know, the technology was still quite inaccessible, and I knew that was making it wasn't like other arts where anyone could do it. And I felt that a lot of that was just psychological. Like, some of it was the technology, some of it was that how it came to be as through this industry. So that's a lot of what Joni for Jackie was about. And then, you know, I arrive at Sundance with Me and You and Everyone We Know, and I'm not, in my mind, a minority, because I've created a world in which I'm not. So I came with a lot of confidence. And when I was asked in like first interviews at Sundance, like, where did you come from? This sort of fully formed feature film, like,
yeah.
I at that point I had stopped Joni for Jackie, but I wanted to point and be like, yeah, you're right. People like me don't occur. Movies like this don't occur without a ton of support. And I had that. You know, I had a whole army around me. I mean, now that project.
I was going to ask you, are there any filmmakers today who were from that group who would be familiar to it?
I mean, there are. I don't think anyone in this audience would know, not to sell you guys short, but it's like a lot of them are artists. A lot, you know, they are all still working. And there's the Getty Museum, the Getty Research Institute ultimately collected the whole Joni for Jackie archive and kind of recognized that it was like a key sort of artist work and distribution network. And you can also, it's all online at this point. You can go to Joni for Jackie.
Amazing, but you created your own support system.
Yeah.
Kind of amazing. That's wildly cool. I mean, I wrote a book about the 90s filmmakers who I'm sure were the kinds of films you might have looked at, like Spike Jonze and Being John Malkovich and David O. Russell. And, you know, I'm keenly aware that all of the people I wrote about, there were 6 filmmakers, were all men and all white men. And it's still, like, you know, as we are now in this period of change and this sort of active desire of leaning in to support filmmakers with different diverse voices and more gender equality, I do sometimes wonder, like, where where are we supposed to birth all of these voices if we didn't have if we didn't create a support system for them? I didn't know it was my job to create a support system. I was chronicling what was going on in the 90s. But you know, that's remarkable that you did that. It's just kind of amazing. So anyway, you then went on and you did the play, you did a shorts, but you ultimately decided that, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you see yourself as a filmmaker, like that was what you were aiming for. You knew you could write, you knew you could do other things, you knew that you had other ways of expression, but that film was going to be the thing that you focused on, that you aimed for?
I mean, I guess, you know, I will always make movies, but I also hope to always write books. And, you know, I know when I come back to my literary agent with like, okay, you know, here's the next book idea, like, let's sell this, you know, to that world of people, of course, it's like, oh, thank God you're done with all that movie stuff. Like, it is its own industry. And
I could see Kajillionaire as a novel easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is true, like, you know, when I was writing my last novel, it had a certain like narrative muscularity, like twists and turns and reveals. And I remember thinking like, you know what this would be really good for as a movie. And I think that fed right into Kajillionaire. You know, I think that's why I created that plot.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a second clip. I'd like to tee that up and show it. I think this is it's a really heartbreaking moment in the film, which has many moments of comedy, but this is one moment that's really heartbreaking, where Evan Rachel Wood is pleading with Deborah Winger, her mother, to say something endearing to her. Let's just show the clip and then we can talk about it.
Why are there crackers on a plate?
Don't go, hun.
Hun.
You've never called me that. I have. I have called you that.
Oh. Call me hun then.
What is that? What is this? Newborn to 18 years.
You can't do it. But you could if it was a job though, right? $1,575 to call me hun.
Oh, three-way split.
It's $525 each.
I don't want to do it that way this time. It's one word, just say
it. Talk to us a little bit about shooting that scene. That there's so much going on there. Very little dialogue, lots of emotion.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's one of those scenes like I had in my mind for so long. Well, I guess you don't see, luckily the scene doesn't spoil it, so you don't see how it ends, but it does keep building. And it was, I mean, you're not really supposed to ask for what you want, especially something so embarrassingly small and pathetic as to just be called hun. But she doesn't really know any better, and their family structure is so transactional that it makes sense that it would immediately, you know, become a transaction. You know, that the money would become important right away. But
I just like cry just thinking about that scene. It's so heartbreaking. I mean, did you have rehearse? I mean, first of all, Deborah Winger, how did you even get her to do the movie? For God's sake, she doesn't. It's impossible to get her to do anything.
I know, and to be right. And she is also like I don't know if you've seen her recently. She's very hot. Like she's continued, as always, to be like a hot woman. The movie she had done before this, the like last thing she'd starred in, she had not one but two lovers. It was called The Lovers. And the
I
Lovers,
saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. Yes. Was it that? And maybe I can't remember. It was. Yeah. But she is still. You rarely see her. Like I would watch her all day long in anything.
Right. I know. Me too. And so here I come along and ask her to be in this movie, and not only that, but like no makeup to cover her amazing body and wear this long hair, and like I don't think it was comfortable to her at all. But she's also the kind of actor and the kind of woman who sort of, it's not like she thrives on discomfort, but she's gonna double down. You know, she's gonna take it and like use it, and that's what she did in this. And from the get-go, she's so insanely dedicated. Like that limp, she has a limp. You don't see it in the scene.
Yeah, you see. Yeah, it's like a nanosecond. You kind of see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And that was in the script. Of course, being her, she researched limps with doctors, and on one day when we were rehearsing, she presented to me an array of like 4 or 5 different limps, and with their medical history of how they had come to me for me to choose from, you know, and which is like
amazing,
so brilliant. And I get it. Like she wanted to really understand it and not just be like adding it on, and she really set the tone, you know, like the bar was quite high for everything because of that. And we totally tussled about things, and she was right a lot of the oh gosh, I mean, there were certain costume, you know, I think she's like, I was the first woman director she'd ever worked with.
Wow.
Yeah, which is like, seems like, how could that be true? But it was.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And as such, I mean, not to gender stereotype, but I think she'd had a real hand in her costumes all along the way. Like, you know, being a woman and being, you know, famously outspoken, like she was used to sometimes often even just doing all her own costumes. And so I love clothes too, you know, I love costumes. I work quite closely with my costume designer. And so I think it wasn't, you know, it was actually a relatively like fun part of it, because I think as we both did enjoy the costumes, but she really had like a deep sense of what she should be wearing, you know, and if something wasn't right, like we learned to trust that. Like usually we realized later why that was, you know, that she's kind of one step ahead.
So interesting. And how did you come to choose Evan Rachel Wood, who is almost unrecognizable if you've seen her in Westworld or anything else she's done? She really goes somewhere very different, very unusual in this role.
Right. So this is like the character doesn't see herself in this way because she's not self-knowing or political, but she's basically like a sort of long-haired butch woman, and you know, who knows what her gender is ultimately going to be in the life after the movie. But and Evan, you know, kind of oddly, the thing that I always had in my head was her Mildred Pierce role, that Todd Haynes HBO remake. Yeah. Obviously could not be more different. Yeah. Just, you know, because she can really be so glamorous and you know, just feminine to the extreme. But she's just so good. And I think as a director, I mean, she's good in everything, but there was something about that movie that really like got under my skin, and you just kind of hang on to those performances in your head. And since there's no one who was like famous enough who actually was like Old Dolio or looked like her, it was kind of like, who do I think is just really an incredible actress? And then from there, you know, meeting her, of course, she wouldn't be drawn to the part if there wasn't some Old Dolio in there. If there wasn't, you know, I think she related quite deeply in ways that some of which I know and understand and we worked with together, and some that are entirely private, because the things she did in that movie kind of goes beyond. I mean, I think it's such an incredible slow burn over the course of that movie. Yeah.
Did you rehearse with her? Did you give her a lot of direction?
Right. So we had to rehearse because it was such a character transformation. And what we did was first I was like, put on these baggy clothes. I had some, like, not her costume yet, but like some clothes I'd gotten for her. She put those on. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to interview you as Old Dolio, like I'm a therapist or something. And these questions are all going to be totally uncomfortable to you because you've never had therapy. You never will, probably. But just answer as best as you can. So first we did that, and she'd be like, like not liking the questions. Then I was like, okay, we're going to keep going. And now you can't talk. You can only use like animal sounds or grunts and so then, she answered the questions that way, kind of like, these sort of physical things. And then I was like, okay, last time, I'm going to keep going. No more sounds, only physical. And she kind of started like ranging around the room, and like I'd ask her a question, she might like knock a book off a shelf, and at that point, I think what happened was it was like her intellectual space became small enough. I mean, she's a fully formed soul in there, like that much we know, but the output is so small that her way of communicating, and that was kind of the place to begin with Old Dolio. Like from there, we were like, okay, maybe your hands stay down by, the more superficial things just fell in place naturally on top of that interior space. That was our approach. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. Now I know why the New Yorker called you, because I love this phrase they came up with, a transcendentalist of the humdrum. pretty thoughtful, and somehow gets the different complexities of what's going on with your work. I think we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you, and thank you so much for being open to this conversation with us.
Oh, of course.
It's beautiful. But I do want to ask you, overall, how are you feeling about the world of film right now and the world that we're sort of moving toward? I think nobody thought this would go on as long as it has, or maybe some people did, but I think a lot of us had hoped would just be back to some sense of normalcy now. And it has really changed what might be the go forward for film.
Right. I know. I mean, I luckily only have to really think about it from a filmmaker's perspective. So I'm so sorry, all of you. But I mean, one thought I've had is that it's kind of like we had all these tools, both as filmmakers, like, this, I can basically make a projectable movie on this phone, and the means of distribution, like I've made and shared very widely things that I've made on that phone. But we haven't, it's like we haven't really known what to do or been that creative with these tools, both as individual artists and maybe also as companies. And I only say that because I'm working so closely with a company right now who is doing a lot of things that that they acknowledge that they've never done before. They're trying things. And I guess, I mean, it's never a good time for a global pandemic. But if as far as the point where we are in filmmaking technologically, it's definitely the best time yet for us to kind of shatter the old, and this is not to say like I think theatrical is dying. I think it's going to come into its own in its own way, but shatter where we came from, you know, like as a filmmaking medium and as an industry, and really into like the 10 million pieces of what this could really be, because it is not the same thing if everyone has access to making it and sharing it, and nor should it be. Like that is what we are going to get out of the technology, is that not just the stories will be different and coming from more diverse storytellers, but even what a movie is, you know, what it looks like, how interactive it is. It's a porous medium, and that's exciting, like that it can change and that it can evolve. Yeah, I'm very curious, and I don't, you know, I think there's a lot of hope, but there's certainly going to be pain and loss along the way.
That's a really thoughtful way to end this conversation, and we have a lot more to think about and talk about, but thank you so much for being here. Encourage everybody to go out and see Miranda's new movie, which opens this week. So we're so lucky to get time with you, because I know you must be so busy, but Kajillionaire, it'll be in theaters, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's in theaters across the country. Here in LA, I think I'm going to drive down to OC. I mean, don't tell anyone, but like I'm going to put on a mask and just check out, like, what is it like now in theaters? Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that we've been talking about at TheGrill, and we just wish you all the best, and thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you, Sharon.